welcome to a special presentation of Somerville City Cable on the revitalization of Union Square and plans going forward. We're going to be joined today by Wig Zamore, the co-chairman of the Union Square Civic Advisory Committee, or CAC. And later on, we're going to be joined by folks from US2, the Union Square Station Associates, which are the master developer partner that was selected by the Somerville Redevelopment Authority in June. Wig, thanks for joining us today.
Yep, happy to do it.
If we can just start off with, if you could just briefly tell us a little bit about yourself and your role on the CAC and what you've kind of done.
Sure. So I've lived in Somerville since the mid-1980s, came down to go to grad school at a real estate development program at MIT, then worked on some of the larger South Boston waterfront developments, background in project development of all kinds, all scales. Not just real estate, some manufacturing startups, some software company experience. And I've lived on Walnut and Highland the whole time I've been here and have spent a lot of time with other local citizens and volunteers thinking about what kinds of future would best complement Somerville's present.
Terrific. For people who don't know about the CAC, it's a 20-member committee. Tell us a little bit about the CAC, its role so far, and what you guys are really tasked with doing as part of the Union Square project.
So the Citizens Advisory Committee was put together by the city after asking for volunteers. They selected 20 different individuals, different genders, different ages, representing different sectors of Somerville, but with a concentration in Union Square. So people who are involved in main streets, housing and equity issues, makerspace, restaurants, and so forth. Just a pretty broad swath of people on the ground in Union Square. I was added, and Tate was added as co-chairs after the committee had been selected at request of the mayor. And the CAC is tasked generally with providing a bridge to public participation as we work with now US2 to figure out the key 12+ acres at the heart of Union Square that span from the new T-stop across the heart of the square to the just emptied out post office. And the importance of that area, though it's small, is that it will cause the integration of the transit and new walk and bike connections to the transit and throughout Union Square and to the neighborhoods beyond. In other words, it's not a single parcel next to a T-stop or a single development trying to take advantage of that T-stop. It's really a mechanism for getting the benefit of the T-stop fairly rapidly integrated into the future of the square. As to what we've done so far, we're tasked with interviewing and watching the presentations and considering the qualifications of all of the development teams that responded to the city's RFQ for Union Square, and making a recommendation to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority on the preferences of the Civic Advisory Committee with regard to the qualifications of those developers. So we initially selected 4 out of 9 initial respondents, 8 of whom were broad-based mixed-use development companies. A stunningly large response, actually, to the city's RFQ. And then we were able to participate in a tour of the home cities and projects of these competing master developers. And at the end, US2 was selected by the Somerville Redevelopment Authority. So our next task will be kind of resetting and working with US2 and the city and staff, elected officials, and the broader community on defining the 12+ acres that US2 is in charge of developing.
Now that US2 is in place, and we're going to talk to them about this, they're going to be spending 100 days doing a lot of community outreach, and during which time they're going to be partnering with the city as they do their master planning process. what are some of the more immediate goals that the CAC would be looking to accomplish in the coming months? So there's specific things that we want to make sure that the city and US2 accomplishes along with the CAC during these next few months that are going to set the stage for what's going to be a very long process and a long project.
Right. So urban land transformations, where you take tens of acres and you change the land uses on them over a few decades, are really completely different from contextual real estate development, which is basically one parcel at a time, figuring out highest and best use for that parcel given the existing context. Urban land transformations require a definition of the future. And so that, broadly speaking, is what we need to do. And we do have a framework from the Somerville Comprehensive Plan, which has laid out a long-term goal of adding about 30,000 jobs to the city, adding about 6,000 housing units. At the end of that, the jobs here and the local workforce here will be about in balance. Somerville has been the most imbalanced community in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So currently we have a job shortage of about 5,000 jobs per acre relative to just the workforce who lives here. At the same time, those 6,000 housing units will be 20% or perhaps more affordable, so that attention is paid to gentrification issues that may be associated with the transit or the creation of new jobs. We'll need to add open space. Somerville is extremely short in public open space. We have about 2 acres of public open space per 1,000 residents, which is about 1/3 of the minimum for a US city that would be recommended. So it's an opportunity to use the open space and the new pedestrian and bike network connecting to the transit to add quality of life to both people who work and live here. Some of the challenges will be first adding the jobs. Somerville has done a great job with local character, with its arts community, with the makerspace already in Union Square, with the small retailers and restaurants, but without much larger daytime job population, those small businesses struggle year in and year out. So that will require bringing in mid-scale employers at the same time as we protect and nurture the makerspace and the artists that already contribute to our local economy and help define the character of the city. Another challenge will be the scale. We're going to be introducing some larger scale. We can't possibly hit the goals of the comprehensive plan unless we introduce some larger scale. So we're going to have to be very careful on how we define the interfaces between the existing neighborhoods, the existing small retail and small structures in Union Square, and the newer buildings, some of which will be larger. That could be very exciting because you can gain a lot of liveliness and eclecticism by having a juxtaposition of the very new and protection of the old. But care has to be taken there. We're also migrating the transportation system here. Somerville has been the most overrun community in the state by highway travel and diesel rail travel. Virtually no Somerville residents or workers use that currently. So our current luck in getting, and hard work, in getting the Orange Line station at Assembly Square and the Green Line stations allows a transition to a much more sustainable, much more environmentally balanced quality of life in connection with walking and biking that can provide healthier lifestyles for everybody, no matter their ethnic background, their economic stature.
In comparison to something like Assembly Square, that was really building a new neighborhood from scratch. Yes. Union Square is already a neighborhood. We already have, as you mentioned, artisans, the maker movement, the local businesses that are already there and contribute to the vitality and culture of the square that's already there. Can you talk a little bit about the CAC? There's the community engagement goes beyond the CAC, but the CAC is an integral part of making sure that there is a community involvement as we talk about that. So you talk about a little bit about how the CAC might view and how you might view how to balance that. You know, we're going to transform these 7 key parcels, 7 key blocks in the square, but how are we going to be able to preserve and work with the local businesses and the people who are already in the square that we don't want to lose?
Right. Well, that's actually quite challenging because for most people, including most designers who work on single buildings at a time, they look to the current context to define the future form of the community. In this case, unlike Assembly Square and unlike the parts of Somerville whose character really will be almost wholesale protected, notwithstanding the Green Line, so that's 85% of the city, in this case, Union Square is unique in being half there already and needing preservation and protection and being half empty. And the hardest thing, I think, is actually to accelerate people's understanding of and consideration of the new structures and spaces so that they can then consider how best to interface with and protect the existing and fine-grained granularity that's on the ground, both in the housing and the small businesses.
Maybe if we could talk a little bit about, and you touched upon this, the inequity that has been there with Somerville in terms of access to public transit. We know that when 93 came in and McGrath, they removed the trail stops, and there are the folks who could most benefit from greater access to public transportation, which will connect them to jobs, to healthcare, to educational opportunities. Can we talk a little bit about that inequity and the benefits that we can realize through greater public transportation, expanded public transportation, and how you also have to balance that with how that can potentially transform a neighborhood?
The starting balance of public transit is really a statement of historic political power. The overwhelming amount of investment in public transit in Massachusetts has been in Boston and Cambridge. And they are the 2 cities that have twice as many jobs as local workforce residents. So that there's a clear relationship between the ability to support a workforce, especially in an urban area, and how good your transit system is. We were extremely fortunate that almost every sector of Somerville came out to support the Green Line campaign. The Orange Line is a $50 million project. As transit goes, that's really not much money. There's huge payoff at Assembly Square, and there's no MBTA money in that project. There's state economic development and developer money in the project, and some highway flex, but no state transit money. The Green Line is another thing entirely, and if we had not turned out en masse in 2004, we would not be getting the Green Line. So it's really a testimony to the city government and elected officials, to the chamber, to volunteer groups like STEP and Mystic View Task Force, to the housing and equity advocates who were comfortable with the Green Line as long as gentrification and diversity and equity issues are paid attention to, and the Bike Committee who, unlike Jamaica Plain, were willing to postpone their realization of bike assets so we could integrate them with the transit. So we're very fortunate in that campaign. And we have an obligation to try to use the transit in a balanced way, just as your question implies. So to maintain the diversity of housing in the city. Our housing is expensive, even though the average income of Somerville residents has actually gone down a little bit each of the last 3 decades. That's not a common perception, but it's true according to the Department of Revenue statistics. So a lot of people are getting pinched. And Somerville at its core is, in my mind, a middle income community. We have a range either side of that, but our average income is actually a little bit below the state average, which I think people maybe don't understand. Our educational density is far in excess of the state average. So we want to use that transit to allow people to get around with less reliance on autos, and with more reliance on transit, walking, and biking, to underlie job creation, and to allow people to get to and from those jobs affordably, so that they can spend their money on housing or quality of life or education, and those kinds of things. So we also, lastly, I would say, have an obligation to do this cost effectively. If you look around at the urban land transformations in South Boston, the Back Bay, East Cambridge, it's difficult to do this in the balanced manner we're talking about. Usually the new is a surprise to people, and it kind of displaces the old. And I think part of that is because we all have an obligation working with the developer to educate and bring the community into the conversation about the physical definition of the future. What do the buildings look like? What are the heights? Where is the density? What is the amount of open space? The amount of open space around projects like Fan Pier and Pier 4 in South Boston is much higher than Somerville people realize. You need that open space if you're going to have bigger buildings and density. So all those things are important.
Wig, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I really appreciate it. Hello, Daniel DeMaina back here again, joined by members of the Union Square Station Associates team, or US2, the master developer partner for the Union Square Revitalization project, selected in June by the Somerville Redevelopment Authority to partner with the city and the CAC on this project. So just like to give you each an opportunity to briefly introduce yourself, say who you are and what you're going to be doing as part of this project.
Good morning, Dan. Appreciate the opportunity to be here on behalf of the entire US2 team. We're extremely excited to be working with you and the city and the CAC and the SRA on the redevelopment of Union Square. My name is Greg Karcheski. I'm the development director for US2. In terms of my background, I come to the table with over 20 years of experience in real estate, both in the design world as well as in economic development and real estate development, and really look forward to all the different elements that are at play in this project and the ability to really work with the community and create something special at Union Square. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Katie.
Hi, my name is Katie Faulkner. I'm a principal at a firm called Nada. Nada is one of several designers that are on this team. It's a great pleasure to be here. And we're a Boston-based firm. We do a lot of community-based work both in and around this area and then also outside the city. Eric?
Hi, my name's Eric Howler. I'm Howler Yoon Architecture, one of the 4 architects on the US2 team. Our firm is based in Boston. We do a mix of different types of projects, ranging from mixed-use commercial work to master planning and interactive architecture. Other 2 members of our team include Studio Gang from Chicago, and David Hassine and Associates, who's also sort of Boston-based, doing a lot of work in the South End, and we're very excited to work together on this. It seems like it's going to be a real collaborative process.
Of course, you're just 3 members. The US2 team is much larger than that. Can you tell me a little bit about the formation of the team and what were the attributes you were looking to bring on board? Why did you select the partners you selected, and what you're trying to accomplish with the partners that you're bringing on board for this project?
Sure, happy to do that, Dan. And I think it was somewhat unique to our team throughout the competition, and something that we've done over and over again as we've taken on really complex, large-scale projects, is really to look for compiling a team that we think is appropriate and specific to that specific challenge, if you will. And so as we started to look at Union Square and some of the opportunities and challenges associated with Union Square, we really customized the team to take on those opportunities and challenges. And we started really with our development team, and it's composed of two development partners, Richie Stein and Jim Lowenberg, that both have a wide range of experiences across a number of different product types, both in the Chicago area as well as nationally. And then we worked locally with a gentleman named Drew Leff from Stantec, who has a lot of experience both in Somerville and the Boston area. Has been working for several decades in the Boston area on different development projects. So we feel like by combining our national expertise and Stantec's local expertise, we kind of get the best of both perspectives from a development team viewpoint. Once we get, kind of formed the development team, we started to look at what other partners are critical to deliver a great result here at Union Square. And as we started to think about it, the design team was an important element to that. And one approach would be to go out and work with one urban planner and maybe one architect. But Union Square has grown incrementally, and is such an eclectic environment. And we know one of the things that the community was very focused on was, how do we ensure that we create something that's kind of maintains that eclecticism and maintains that variability and that interest over time. And so one of our approaches was really to engage a variety of design firms on our team so that they could bring their different voices to the design process. And so maybe I'll turn it over to Katie and Eric, and they can kind of describe a little bit how some of the different firms are going to interact throughout the process.
Yeah, happy to. This is a unique opportunity for us. I can't think of another project that we've been involved with that's quite like this one. All of us knew Jim Lowenberg and Magellan Development. He's got some connections to MIT. Both Eric's partner, Mejan, and my partner, Nader, know James Lowenberg quite well. But it really was Drew Leff from Stantec, who has been in this community for a couple of decades, that pulled this team together. And in addition to the 4 architecture firms, we have Mick Young Kim for landscape, we've got Fenwick McCready on transportation. These are all people that I consider to be doing really provocative work. To bring those together to a group like Union Square is unlike any other community-based proposal I've ever done. To have the opportunity to collaborate with this group is not just an honor, but it's so inspiring. I can't actually tell you what the outcome of it will be, but I know that through the process it's going to be something that's much greater than the actual sum of its parts. So to do something like this, I think we would say we're sort of treading new ground. Not a lot of the community development projects in the Boston area have taken this tack, and I think it's really going to be exciting.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we're really excited to test out this process. Talking about what a city is or what it could be, it's really a collective enterprise. It's not about a single hand or a master developer, a single author. Obviously, cities develop over time with multiple authors, and this idea of different architects collaborating with different consultants and landscape architects, I think it's an exciting way to work in a way that's beyond the limits of your own parcel. That we're sort of working to develop a neighborhood, not just a parcel, or not an aggregation of buildings, but actually the public realm that ties them together. So that's really the promise of this, and getting all these people together, working together on this should be the right way to do this process.
In addition to the design team, and Katie alluded to it, we felt like there were some other technical experts that were very important to the process. When it comes to transportation and transit, the work being done around the square to look at different roadway configurations to improve both not only the vehicular ingress and egress in and through the square, but also really to make pedestrians and bicycles welcome in the square is an important foundation for what we envision the future of the square being. And so, bringing in Fenwick McCready and Deborah Fenwick, as well as Nelson Nydgaard, which has a national reputation and has worked here actively in Somerville, was important to us in terms of bringing their insight into solving some of those challenging problems associated with the square. And then the other thing I would mention is really just the importance of community engagement. I think at the beginning of the process, we, throughout the competition, made it an emphasis of our approach to make sure that we were engaging the community and listening to the community. We know the community's put a lot of effort into Summer Vision and some of the, the other processes that led us to this point, and we want to be respectful of that as we move forward. So, Sage Consulting and Resolute Consulting are important team members and continuing to build on the momentum that we've had so far on that front.
Greg, you mentioned the community engagement process. You all talked a little bit about that. Eric, as you mentioned, the idea of multiple authors, not a master hand, but everybody kind of working collaboratively to try to achieve the goals that the community came up with. Obviously, you guys have a lot of community engagement events scheduled coming up. We have the Kickoff event on August 19th. There's going to be a host of opportunities for people to engage. The other part of that is the master planning process. You really have to start that process mapping out how exactly you're going to accomplish this. Can you talk a little bit about the master planning process that you're partnering with the city on and how it might be different than a typical master planning process?
You know, as we start to think about master plan, our thinking's evolving to thinking of it more as an urban framework, because we really feel like what happens in the square needs to be flexible over time, because it's going to be a long-term development. There's going to be a lot of inputs, and the facts are going to change as we move forward. So it's important to think of that as something that's a framework and more flexible. So that's kind of the perspective that we're going into the process with. I think in terms of our efforts on the master plan in the first 100 days, it's primarily going to be focused on gathering information from the community. So when we were going through the competition, we were very focused on getting feedback from the community. Now the context has changed a little bit because we're actually moving forward with a planning process. So one of the very first things we're doing is our entire team is going out into the community and interviewing over 50 individuals from all different perspectives in the city to get a baseline of their thoughts about what the square can be and could be. And the idea is that at the end of the 100 days, we'll be able to report back out to the community about, hey, this is what we've learned. These are all the different perspectives. And we're positive there's going to be some aligned perspectives as well as some divergent perspectives. And those are the things we're going to have to rationalize as we move forward to look at the plan. Beyond the 100 days, and I guess I should say coincident with kind of going through that community engagement process, we're going to be defining a master urban framework planning process that'll last 6 to 9 months after the 100-day period, where we'll work with the community and our design team to really kind of collaborate on developing an urban framework for the square. And that's going to include some very specific opportunities for the community to become involved. At the very early part of the process, we plan on hosting a number of workshops where we'll invite members of the community to talk about some of the issues that are specific to the development, whether that's affordable housing or sustainability or transportation, and then have several charrettes where we'll have an opportunity for the community to actually come in and talk about, how do we take those different planning issues and make them a reality in the square. And there's certainly going to be trade-offs along the way, and that's one of the things we're going to have to talk to the community about as we go through it. But the goals of the process will really be to make sure that the realization of the development in the square speaks to what the community's interests are. To be innovative. I mean, I think you heard Katie and Eric talk about the importance of our team kind of pushing the boundaries of what we're doing here. And so to me, it's important that the output of that process is innovative. And last but not least, it needs to be feasible, right? We want to create a plan that's actionable. And so those will be the things that we're focused on as we go through the planning process.
You alluded to this, that it's not just the 7 blocks here. That's where, the redevelopment, maybe new buildings would go up or anything. But how that affects the rest of the neighborhood. Is it cohesive? Does it all work together? And that is... Union Square is already a thriving neighborhood. It's already a place where you have the maker movement, you have artisans, a lot of local businesses that are beloved. And looking beyond those 7 blocks, how you're going to be doing this community engagement, how are you going to be working with the rest of the neighborhood, the current residents, the local businesses that are already in the square, to really achieve the goals that the community sees for the square of more jobs, more housing, more open green space, while preserving what people already love about Union Square?
Sure. I think it's a great point, and part of what's so attractive about this project, and Eric and I were just talking about it before we started the interview, is there's such a great foundation in terms of the innovation and the different ethnicities that are represented in the square. And that's something that we want to make sure as we go through this process that we preserve. In terms of thinking about the 7 parcels, I think, as we think about it, we really think about a neighborhood, and that neighborhood's really, centered on the square. And then the other big kind of important piece to that is the addition of the T station, right? And so as we look at planning the area, we're going to look at planning the area north of the station as well as south of the station. And the 7 parcels are one piece of the whole, but really we're looking at, hey, how do we create a great neighborhood over time? And how do we meet the community's goals, both near-term and long-term, both north of the station and south of the station? So that's some of the perspective that we're going to bring into that dialogue. And maybe I'll ask Katie and Eric to see if they have anything to add.
One thing that I found fascinating in the process is that I've lived in and around this area most of my life, and my definition of Union Square decades ago was a much smaller area, the kind of a 5-corner traffic parcel, than it is now, which has become this kind of 12 acres once you add the Boynton Yards to it. I think the neighborhood actually is even larger than that. So it isn't just the 7 parcels you're talking about, it's the people who want to move here and live here, and then of course they want to know about the amenities and the school and the library and the businesses. It's so much bigger than 7 blocks. The 7 blocks will be successful because of these other support systems that extend like tentacles out from the block. But Union Square is not a square anymore. It's a neighborhood. It's a part of the city, and I think that for us has been an education. And I think to bring in all these other disciplines will be quite informative as far as what could happen there.
Yeah, I agree. When we started looking at the square itself, we realized that it's not a square, it's a network. It's not a single object or a single building, it's a network of streets and public spaces. And so when we started thinking about this in the first 100 days, we were trying to think, what's the space between buildings? What are the little piazzas, the little shaded areas, the places people sit? And that's really essential to sort of get that right, And so one of the first things we're going to do is sort of develop a vision for the public realm, the kind of the material that binds the neighborhood together, create a sense of cohesion. And that could be with landscaping, plantings, with lighting, with program, with public art. And all these things are what sort of coalesces into a kind of cohesive public realm.
Dan, I think you asked about existing businesses and how do we engage existing businesses, and I think there's existing businesses that are part of the development parcels, but then there's a large number of businesses that surround the development parcels that are going to be impacted by what happens around them, hopefully in a very positive way. I think that, one of the things that's incumbent upon us and one of the things that we want to work with the city on is really how do we create a program where those businesses feel supported in this process so that they have access to resources to enable them to take advantage of the opportunity. I was actually just speaking with a business owner last week who said, this is a great opportunity that, a rising tide should benefit all ships. And I think that's exactly the right attitude that existing businesses should have, and we just need to work with those businesses to give them an opportunity to kind of take advantage of the changing landscape around them. The other thing is we're going to be very supportive of the businesses here in Somerville. We're going to look to Somerville businesses to work with us on different components of the development. Even in the last couple of weeks, we updated our website with Above Summit, a local Somerville company, and then we had a great gathering of our team, sort of a kickoff event at a new brewery in town, Aeronaut Brewery. So if you haven't checked it out, I would encourage you to go check it out. But we will continue to kind of work with making this project a collective effort of the whole community, and so it's important that we continue in that vein.
The kickoff event to meet the US2 team will be taking place on the Union Square Plaza on Tuesday, August 19th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. It's going to be a fun social event, just an opportunity to meet members of the team, have some food, share some of your ideas about the future of Union Square, so we hope to see you there.